David Wootton, thank you very much for coming back on the call for us.
It's all, Matty. Delighted.
As we know, we had a meeting on Sunday, so this is technically our Young Masons virtual social extra.
Excellent.
To get the additional questions that we missed or we didn't have enough time for. So what we'll do is as three will just say 3 questions each that were missed. Barry's going to start, myself, and then Mitch. So if Barry can take it away, that'd be great.
Okay. Good evening, Barry.
Good evening. The first question comes from Darren O'Brien. Sorry if I got that wrong. Darren from Leicestershire and Rutland. The question to you, David, is: are UGLE lodges permitted to be in other countries where there's an existing recognised regular Grand Lodge?
The answer is it varies. There is a convention that we don't have English lodges in other countries where there is a Grand Lodge without the Grand Lodge's agreement. In a small number of countries, there is an agreement that while there are existing old established English lodges, we won't consecrate anymore. There are lots of countries where there are no Grand Lodges, and we will be interested if it's the right kind of country in if there was interest amongst people who wanted to be Masons in those countries in helping them with a new lodge. Where there is no agreement, then yes, we do form them as we do from time to time. So, like all things in Masonry, it varies.
So would those individuals reach out to Grand Lodge directly and say, we want to set up a new lodge? Is that how it works?
Yeah, they would inquire of the Grand Secretary, Dr. Staples, and he would take it from there. There is a team in Freemasons Hall who deal with our relations with other Grand Lodges. The principle is recognition. We look very hard at the makeup and the values that the other Grand Lodges follow. Sometimes we de-recognize them, withdraw recognition, because we don't think they're doing consistently with us. As I said on the other night, that there are in the US that there's a Grand Lodge per state, and most we recognize. Last year, we withdrew recognition from 2 Grand Lodges states in the southern part of the United States because they decided to change their rules to make being actively gay a Masonic offence, as opposed to a legal offence, a Masonic offence, and that was way beyond the red line for us. So we would do recognition, but we do recognise Grand Lodges in about 200 countries. Though in Brazil it's probably less than 200, about 200 Grand Lodges. In Brazil, for instance, there are 20 or so states, and there's a Grand Lodge in each one. We also have a principle that we don't recognise more than 1 Grand Lodge per country, just to keep things orderly.
Okay, that's great. I could probably ask you some more questions around the kind of how you kind of blacklist Grand Lodges and things like that. But
just to we need to know that they are the way they go about their masonry, their ritual is consistently with the way we do it. We want to see that they don't break any laws, break any principles that we would find inconsistent with our masonry. And the example I've just given is obviously one. And where senior figures in those lodges, attract adverse publicity, shall we say, and then they don't deal with it. We look at that kind of thing, because we want to maintain a high reputation for ourselves, because that benefits English Masons at all levels, and we want to maintain association only with those of similar reputation.
It's such an interesting question and a brilliant answer. Just finally to finish, where does the buck stop with regards to implying sanctions or rulings on Masonic activity? Let's take those two Grand Lodges in America, for instance. Are they just able to go with those rules and do as they please?
They are the accurate phrase, which is sovereign Grand Lodge. Just as United Grand Lodge is a sovereign Grand Lodge, we can do what we want. There are laws of the country, which not just because we promise, in our Masonic ritual to do, but we would obviously want not to contravene any laws. But subject to that, we can do what we want. So can any sovereign Grand Lodge anywhere, because the United Grand Lodge of England was the first one to be formed, and because of Britain's influence throughout the world over centuries, it's fair to say we are regarded around the world as the premier Grand Lodge. The gold standard is being recognised by the United Grand Lodge of England. There are Grand Lodges who take a different view from the gold standard, and they can do what they like, but if they do, we won't recognise them. And that means that you will see on lodge summonses in this country and in letters you get warnings about brethren attending lodges in other countries and needing to make sure, which you can easily do with a phone call to the Grand Secretary's office, that the lodge is affiliated to a Grand Lodge that we do recognise.
Fantastic. Great question.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Darren, for that question. The next one is from Matt Nimara of the Leeds Light Blues Club, and his question is to you, Sir David. What are your top 3 lodges that you've been to in the UK or further afield that you've ever visited? So which ones are the best?
I'm about to say Argonauts Lodge, number 2243. My mother lodge is of course, one's mother is always the best. The second one would be, I come from Bradford in Yorkshire, and in 2013 there was formed, not exactly an old school lodge, but very close. It's for people who, for brethren who have a link, either because they went there or their brother went there or they worked there, with the school I went to, which is Bradford Grammar School, which is called Bradfordians Lodge, which is the one lodge, I'm thinking very carefully now, yes, the one lodge outside London of which I'm a member. The third one would be the Star of the East Lodge in Zakynthos, which I did mention in my talk on Sunday. I was at school and university. I studied classical Latin and Greek, and here was a lodge in Greece which did their working in Greece, following as a literal translation, which meant that when I entered and I was saluted, as rulers are, the custom obviously is that I would stand up and thank the brethren for their kind and fraternal salutation, and I greet you all well. And some fit of stupidity said, I really ought to do this in Greek. So I did. I got somebody to translate that into Greek for me, and I managed to get the words out. Modern Greek is quite difficult for English people to pronounce. Some of the words are a bit tongue twisted. It's a fantastic language, but it doesn't come very easily like some languages do for us. But I managed to manage to get there. So that would be my 3.
And probably because of your standing, no one would have told you that it was a bad pronunciation. Or
No, I could. You're right, Mitch. I could work out that it was pretty rotten.
At least you're honest.
They were going to be diplomatic.
The final question from me before I hand over to Mitch. Are you next?
Matty.
Matty? That's 50-50 chance of getting that wrong. This question comes from Marcus Jenkins from the Sarsen Club, and he wants to know, what does a normal day look like for you as Assistant Grandmaster?
Thank you, Marcus. There are some days when I have no Masonic activity at all. That's about one day a week. In normal times, well, actually, quite often it's working out that way now, though it's all on screen. There will frequently be a meeting of some kind in Freemasons Hall, either to do with the university's scheme, or to do with membership, or to do with appointments. And then 2 or 3 times a week, there will be a lodge meeting. I'm a member of, I think, 7 or 8 lodges, but actually I visit a lot, particularly the university's scheme outside London. So there will frequently be changes of clothes into stripes and formal gear in the evening. You find actually there are quite a surprising number of lodges that meet at lunchtime. They're not suitable for working people like you, Masons clubs, because you'll be busy. But for those who find it easier, those who are older and find it easier to meet at lunchtime, there are some of those. So I would say half the time it's management of some kind, and half the time Masonic meetings. And although it's the same 3 degrees on the installation, it's always different. That's why I enjoy going. The places are different, the people are different, and although we do say, don't we, that we oblige a worshipful master to undertake not to permit any deviation from or variation in the ceremonies. I've yet to discover 2 lodges that did it the same way. That's really fascinating.
Very good. That's great. Thank you for answering those, and thank you, Marcus, for the question. Matty, over to you.
All right, so the first of our 3 questions I've got to ask. The first one is from PJ Bansal from Essex Cornerstone Club, and he asks, Sir David, are you a member of any progressive orders?
By progressive orders, he means what you might call the side orders.
I think so, yes.
I'm obviously in the craft and chapter. I'm a member of 3 Mark lodges, and one of them, 2 of them are based at, actually it's 4 Mark lodges, 3 of them based because I'm a founder of a new one, based at Mark Mason's Hall, and another one based at 10 Duke Street, which is the headquarters of Rose Choir. Mark, as you know, has one degree rather than 3, but it tells an equally interesting part of the story. Mark Lodge, of which I'm a founder, reminds me of my youth when I was a boy, and I'm sufficiently old to remember steam engines. That's part of the heritage, actually, pulling normal trains. And as it happens, my younger son, who after leaving university went into the theatre business, but that pays very badly, and he decided on a career change and is now a train driver on the trains from King's Cross up to Peterborough and Cambridge. And just at the moment, a couple of years ago, that he became a train driver, someone asked me just out of the blue whether I was interested in trains, and that led to my being a founder of a new Mark Lodge called Locomotion Lodge,
Brilliant.
which is a different angle and a different form of special interest lodge. Of the other orders based at Mark Mason's Hall, I'm only a member of one, which is the Red Cross of Constantine, which is another story. All the progressive orders have some story based on biblical or Christian stories, and all tell an interesting tale. There's only one other, and I haven't joined any others because I've got quite enough to do as Grand Master, and I can't be out every night, though each of them is tempting. The only other one is I'm a member of the Scottish order called the Royal Order of Scotland, based in Edinburgh. It too covers quite a large number of the world, parts of the world, and is divided into provinces. The biggest province is the whole of the United States, and the smallest province is the City of London. And I'm currently, at least for another month, the Provincial Grand Master of the province of the City of London in that order.
Fantastic.
Lovely.
Try and get around a bit, but not too much.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, PJ Bansal.
Thank you, PJ.
Our next one is from David Little, and I think he's still the current chairman of Sarsen Club. And he asks, Sir David, in your role as AGM, do you get to visit any of the districts? And if so, which has been your favourite that you've visited?
Fiji, which I think is technically the district of the Southwest Pacific, and it's Fiji and neighbouring. When I say neighbouring, it's only 700 miles away. An island called Vanuatu, and I think there's a lodge on Papua New Guinea as well. I had to. The rulers were dispatched around the globe as part of the tercentenary celebrations of organised masonry in England 3 years ago, and I drew the short straw of Zealand, Fiji, India, and South America. But Fiji, small number of Masons in a country which is a democracy, but it's a slightly divided kind of democracy, in that only part of the population of a particular ethnicity vote. There are large numbers of the population resident there, different ethnicity, who don't. And it's not white other, it's more complicated than that. But it's a very, very, very nice place, and very nice gathering of Masons. So there was that. There was New Zealand, where I visited the district of New Zealand North Island, and as part of the celebrations, we were going to be welcomed into a Maori hut, which is not a hut. It's a huge building to be received by the local Maori community, and you'll be familiar with the haka that the New Zealand rugby team perform before each game. Well, that is derived from a Maori ritual, which was performed by a warrior with a spear. And it's actually a welcome to the building, though when you find that because you're the assistant Grand Master and you're the principal guest, you suddenly find that you walk up surrounded by everybody until it gets close to the scene of welcome, and then you suddenly discover that you're still there and all the others have gone safely behind, and there's this wonderful Maori performing ritual. You just hope he's going to keep the spear in in his hand. So there, and I've been to India on a couple of occasions where, as I said the other night, huge numbers of young Indian men, greatly enthusiastic. So yes, South Africa as well, and South America, and these are places where South Africa and South America, where there is a very successful and thriving sovereign Grand Lodge, but where people who are native to that country, Argentinians, Chileans, choose partly for social reasons, partly because they like the association with England, with Britain, the United Kingdom, to join our lodges. So very enjoyable and very enthusiastic, and I wish everybody could go. And I suspect that some of those districts have got new and young Masons clubs, and there's a lot of scope for, I think, establishing links with them.
Yeah,
I would work on that.
Yeah.
Somebody will know. The Lister Park in Freemasons Hall is the link man with the districts, and he'll be able to find out if he doesn't know already.
Well, pen.
We will pen that down.
One of the, so just to have that, we are, if you like, exporting the university scheme concept to the districts, and there are 3 districts that already have them, but other districts, New Zealand, for example, is very keen on having, because they see the point, and if they don't already know about the new and young Masons concept, I think it would be a very good idea to tell them.
Well, I think New Zealand, especially the South Island with Christchurch and Dunedin, 2 very big university towns, that is the main sort of a lot of the population. So I think that'd be a great idea.
Auckland is a big university town.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't forget Cape Town and Johannesburg.
Yeah, definitely something to ponder over, I think. And I think you solved the concept of these beautiful places like Fiji. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to try to aspire for this AGM role that you've got now. They're getting for your job, sir. Our next one is from Matthew Wharton from Lee's Light Blues. And he asks, Sir David, I was particularly intrigued by your comments regarding being careful not to initiate individuals from nations where Freemasonry is illegal. Does UGLE have any formal guidance for this, for lodges or prospective lodges in particular? And then he just put particularly circumstances where an individual might be a foreign national but with a permanent residency here in the UK.
The strict answer to your question is no formal guidance, and it wouldn't be not to initiate blanket. It would be to have a discussion with the candidate as to whether he was comfortable being initiated in those circumstances, and that could lead to a discussion with the province, and indeed a discussion with Grand Lodge, who would be happy to help. There aren't a great number of countries to which this applies, and those countries' attitude, which is why it will be difficult to lay down hard and fast rules. There are lots of Masons in Britain who are Chinese. Masonry is illegal in China, but that's not to say that the Chinese authorities would take action. They just did in this case. So I suspect what I will do, Matty, is ask whether we would like to look at issuing formal guidance, but I suspect it may be that if there is a candidate for initiation from a country which might be in this category, best to have a word with the province, and the province will check it out with Grand Lodge, because what we don't want, as we had in that case, was a situation where it came by surprise.
Yeah.
It hadn't occurred to anybody in the lodge that this would be an issue, including the brother.
Yeah. And I guess to some degree it's a bit few and far between. I mean, those circumstances are probably quite irregular compared to any other circumstance. Yeah.
Great question.
Great. Yeah, that was brilliant. So I'm going to hand you over to Mitchell.
Ready? Mitch.
Great questions, Matty, and the questions you asked. David, the first one comes from Alan Coleman of the Sarson Club. During your time as Lord Mayor of London, what would you say was your biggest achievement? And did the role as Lord Mayor help with the duties of Assistant Grand Master?
In reverse order, undoubtedly, yes. When you're Lord Mayor, you are a public figure, office rather than the person, inevitably. And that means that whenever you go to an event, you're in the front row, either standing or seated, but you're always pushed to the front and people are always looking at you. So you have got to be aware of that. You can't roll your eyes, despair when somebody says something. You can't pick your nose. You can't fall asleep. You have to absolutely pay attention, and that was a learning experience which has stood me in good stead. On always walking, standing upright, just being aware that you're being looked at all the time. I'm going to give you 3 answers to what my achievement was, starting from the negative and going to the positive. The negative was not being caught out by the press. It may sound odd, but in a week in which a senior figure in the city has been forced to resign from his job because something he said about a woman, which was a sort of male type comment that you would say that in those, which he said in a private conversation 12 years ago, and it came out in evidence in a court case last week, and he's gone. I hope I would never be in that particular category, but what you say is always being scrutinised, and when you're talking to the press or the television or the radio, you know they're not acting. Generally, they're not acting in bad faith, but they're not trying to trip you up for a nasty reason. But what they are, they want a headline. They want something that they can write about. And I managed to get through the year without getting caught out in that sense, or produce a headline. Producing a reaction did the Lord Mayor really? So that's one thing. The second thing, my sport was rowing. The top event in British rowing is Henley Royal Regatta. And when I was a boy, I followed everything that happened each summer at Henley, and the top thing I formed the view then was being asked to present the prizes to the winners at Henley on the last day at the end of the regatta. And when I was Lord Mayor, they asked me to do that.
Lovely.
Boyhood dream come true. The much better answer to your question, each Lord Mayor has a charitable appeal, and I decided that my appeal was going to be for something unfashionable. It wasn't going to be for one of the big name charities. The unfashionable bit of the medical world is called trauma or injury. It's not hearts or cancers, which are in that sense, in the charity sense, much better known. But I wanted something that was unfashionable and would benefit a large number of people. So I settled on the trauma unit, the injury unit, in the Royal London Hospital, which is just to the east of the city of London, and where if you're in the eastern half of London and you have a bad accident, that's where you'll go. We managed to raise a 7-figure sum in the for them. So that is undoubtedly, in the serious way, once the question is asked. Alan, thank you very much. That was it.
It's a brilliant a brilliant occasion and a role to be considered for. And for me personally, I didn't really know too much about the Lord Mayor of London as such. I think it sort of you take a sideline to actually the Mayor of London, which at one point I couldn't really differentiate. But how special was it for you, especially 2012 was the year, I believe. Is that correct?
It was. I was very fortunate. I was interested, have been interested in Charles Dickens, and there's a museum in Bloomsbury in London called the Charles Dickens Museum, which is where he lived in London, and I was chairman of the trustees of that at the time. And it was his bicentenary, so lots of celebrations in February 2012, the 200th anniversary of his birth, and then the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in June, and then the London Olympics.
I was going to mention the Olympics. Must have been a special time to be Lord Mayor.
Well, at that time, given that most people had got tickets to nothing, because you had to be in the ballot, and only a small percentage got tickets to anything, and because we did a lot of official hospitality for them, on the evening of the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony of the Olympics and the opening of the Paralympics, all the big cheeses, all the VIPs that went in the VIP bit started off at the stadium, started off with a big drinks do in Guildhall, hosted by me, and then got in buses and went. And because of that, they gave me what's called an accreditation, which means my problem was what to miss.
Right.
And in fact, I suppose, different answer to the earlier question around about what was my greatest achievement. On the middle Saturday of the Games, it became known as Super Saturday because six gold medals were won by British athletes. And because they were in 3 different locations, it would have been quite difficult for any one human being to see them all live. And so far as I can work out, there were only 3 people who did that. One was the Princess Royal, the second one was her husband, and the third one was me.
Well done.
Very, very smart from one venue to another.
Yeah, it was such an amazing event. I could pick your brains on it all night, but I'll move on to the next question. This is from Benjamin Pritchard of the Colonnade Club in South Wales. Sir David, as a rower myself, what was your favourite boat and why?
It was an 8. It was my favourite boat because it went fastest, speed, and the position in the boat. And this will interest Benjamin, was 6, which is obviously 8 rowers, and you start counting from the front of the boat, with technically number 1 at bow, then 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 is 2 away from the end, and I like that because you can control. People looking at a rowing 8 think it's stroke, the one at the back nearest the cocks. You think that the stroke sets the pace. Well, actually, it's 6. The stroke might set it, but the 6 guy will control whether what he wants actually happens. So it's a very central position.
Okay. Interesting. From a non-rower, I'll take your word for it.
Well, technical answer. Well done, Benjamin.
Thank you, Benjamin. This is the last question. It does come from me. David, aside from the introduction of technology and social media, what would you say was the most significant change in how Freemasons operate today? And in particular, how has UGLE changed since you were initiated over 40 years ago? Just before you start, I was looking at I've seen something before. I think it was at either a quarterly communication, maybe way back in the 90s or so. Am I right in thinking it used to be held at Earl's Court, or there was a big event at Earl's Court at one point?
The big ceremony to mark the 275th anniversary, which is therefore, 1992.
92. I knew it was somewhere around.
Was held in Earl's Court.
And I remember seeing something about Freemasonry having to change back then in order to bring in more people, not necessarily younger men, but in general, more joining members. So that sort of links into a question. I couldn't for the life of me find the article or the news thing, but I just wondered how, since you joined, and bearing in mind it's been over 40 years, how has it changed? Obviously, social media has had a big part, but without, how has it changed?
It is now much more open than when I started out. I did say when I was talking on Sunday that I don't recall the word masonry or Freemason being used before I actually attended on the night. It was because of who was asking me. I thought, well, this can't be a bad thing, can it? But I was not. The true nature of it came as rather a surprise to me, and the way brethren behaved was very secretive. And I bought for my regalia one of these little leather cases, and the lodge met fairly close to where I worked. So on lodge days, I would take this little case in. And I remember one day, after I'd been in the lodge a few years, somebody else in the firm tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I see you got that little case. I know what that is." And I decided, well, clearly I'd picked up the message about secrecy. And so I abandoned the case and I brought my regalia from then on in an old rucksack. And I look back on that and I think, why did I do that? And that's because the whole thing was shrunk. You just didn't tell anybody. Yeah. Looking back, what I now know about Masonry was you go back to Victorian times, or really any time until the Second World War. Masonry was out there in the high street. You see lots of, in local towns, the Masons processing up and down in full regalia, and always laying wreaths at the local war memorial on Remembrance Sunday, etc., etc. And then roundabout and after, the various explanations of this, after the Second World War, for some reason we all got uptight and went secret. And that dominated my early years. But in the last 10 years, it has changed, and people are now much more open, which is much easier for younger people to join. Because the worry, if it's secret, is how do you explain to your mates what you're doing? Oh, he's off for that secret thing, and that's just not healthy. That's just no good. So the greatest change is the openness and the willingness to talk about it. The other change is that there are, and the second point is largely probably a result of the first. There are fewer Masons than there were after the Second World War. I think we've, over the last 4 or 5 years, not just realised that. I think the leadership of Masonry always did realise that. They could count as well as anybody else. They just didn't do anything. And I don't think they minded, as long as they could carry on with their Masonry. For the last 5 years, we realised we do mind. Mm. And then you need to decide, well, is Masonry worth having? Emphatically, yes, it is. So you need to turn things round, which we are in the process of doing. And the numbers will go back up again, but it's only because of this this openness. So lower numbers over my 40 years, but abandonment of general secrecy. As we know, there are Masonic secrets, but they're only very small bits, even within the ceremony themselves. The bits you're obliged to keep secret are very small bits, and everything else we can be open about, which are being. So the whole thing is much healthier.
I think the only thing, when people go public about it, especially in the newspapers and the media, whatever, the secret's the only things they want to know about. They don't really, they couldn't care less about anything else. Which
no, you're entirely right. Another feature of secrecy was that you stay secret even when you're attacked or when there's negative comment. You just don't reply, which makes it very easy. It's an open goal, and journalists are always going to aim for an open goal. Why wouldn't you? And it's, as you can tell, it's a line that plays well. But I have always thought, when I say always, since becoming assistant Grand Master, there was no point in trying to say to the media or to other public figures, look, we're nice guys, really. That's not going to work. What is going to work is working in the community at local level and showing others that we're good organisations, which is where the New and Young Masons clubs come in, and the university scheme lodges, but particularly lodges doing community engagement stuff that everybody recognises is a good thing, and changing, if you like, public opinion at a local level. And newspapers only print what they think their readers want to see. And if we carry on doing that, but quietly making sure that people know the Masons are doing, eventually, and I don't think it'll be very long, the newspapers will stop because their readers will say, lay off these guys. Secret's boring. Write something else.
I think one of the things that's really impressed me with the comms team at UGLE is that obviously they're quite active on Twitter, which, you know, myself, Matty and Mitch are too, and so are you. Yep. Is that if there is any mention of Freemasonry in an incorrect way, particularly from celebrities, so I'm thinking back to Piers Morgan, for example, he mentioned something about Freemasons in a negative way, that the guys from the comms team at UGLE are, you know, they're confronting that negative information or that incorrect information, and, you know, and that gives a real boost to the members to see that we are, you know, people fighting for our cause in that respect as well.
Yes. Well, the world of politics, political parties, in that world, you will see political parties and organisations being ready to rebut, to respond to negative comment against them. The thing to remember about journalists is that getting your facts right is a basic rule of journalism. You can comment all you like, so long as you get your facts right. And the great thing that the comms team have done is where a journalist had got the facts wrong, the article that prompted the "enough is enough." The first instance of this, where David Staples went on the attack, as it were, was an article in the Guardian alleging that journalists and members of Parliament met in a Masonic lodge meeting in the Houses of Parliament, and there were 3 factual errors in that story, and David attacked the facts. And if you can knock the facts out, then because a journalist hates it being shown that they got their facts right. They love people arguing with the opinion, the comment, because they want a response, they want a discussion, they want some reason for writing the next article. My story about this has prompted a huge debate. Let me tell you about the debate. But if they got their facts wrong, they can't do that.
It's embarrassing, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's a failure of the basic level of journalism. No journalist likes that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. I just again, thank you, Sir David Hugh Wootton, for joining us for our Young Masons Virtual Social. Bit on the side, a bit extra. Actually, I probably shouldn't call it a bit on the side, but extra. And the questions, and you've been a fantastic sport, and we thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who asked the questions on last Sunday's Virtual Social, and we were so pleased that you were able to give us the time to ask the extra questions that we didn't have time to. So thank you very much.
Well,
my
sitting in this chair, my wife thrust a glass in my hand and wish the guys a restful and happy weekend. So I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you to your wife. She's very good. Thank you to Barry. Thank you to Matty again for the hard work that they put into organising this, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. If you wouldn't mind joining us again for a Young Masons Virtual Social. Thank you, and maybe in person if we ever get the chance to meet again.
I'm sure we will. Not sure when, but I'm sure.
So David, thank you very much.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.